Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Balanced Life with Dr. Jacquie here at Black Star Network. You know, each and every week we talk about topics and bring dialogue and discussion about those things that are impacting our everyday lives. I know that living a balanced life isn't easy, but we do give it a good try. As we're talking about various things today, we're going to step back for a moment. I know it's November and you're ready for the holidays. We want to talk about turkey and that good sweet potato pie that you're going to be eating. But we need to pause for a moment and talk a little bit more about breast cancer awareness. And we're also going to talk about trials. You see, breast cancer happens to people each and every day. Someone gets a diagnosis and oftentimes they are unprepared, uncertain, and are not sure which avenues are best for them. Today, we are going to be joined by Dr. Regina Hampton, our breast cancer and surgery specialist, also Pastor J.T. Johnson of the Word Network, Dr. Tierney, our Level Up coach, and our special guest today will be Ricky Fairley, and she is of the organization Black Breast Cancer Alliance. We're going to talk to her today about the variety of trials that are at our disposal and why it's important for women of color, people of color, to get involved. Welcome in, everyone. I am delighted that each of you are joining us today because we had such an amazing discussion during our month of October talking about breast cancer. And it dawned on me that there are going to be times in people's lives where breast cancer isn't just October. And we have a tendency to relegate such a very heavy topic in the African-American community to just being a month. But it happens every single day. I want to engage Dr. Hampton for just a moment to share with us what are some of the statistics and how often are people diagnosed with breast cancer?
So about 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer. When we look at the incidence rates for African-American women actually get less breast cancer than our white counterparts. However, when we look at the mortality rates, it's really a more dismal statistic. Black women die 40% more than our white women. And some of the challenges, as we've talked about before, because we develop breast cancer at younger ages, typically under the age of 50, and we tend to get a more aggressive form of breast cancer called triple negative breast cancer. And then there's, of course, the problems with barriers and disparities. And so we really have a long way to go. I think we're making some strides, but we have a long way to go really to equal the playing field when we talk about breast cancer in women.
That is an actually amazing fact in sense that we don't get it as often, but our mortality rate is higher. And I want to talk to Pastor JT about that for a moment, because he's in that clerical space, not administration, but clergy, in a sense of hope and that disparity. Pastor JT, when people are faced with the diagnosis and trying to figure out what their steps should be, we talk about prayer, faith, and all of those belief components being a very big part of who we are and what we do. In your work as a pastor, where does faith fall in that line of giving us that initial understanding of being ready to move on and look at some of the things available at our disposal?
Well, Dr. Jacquie, to be perfectly honest with you, I believe that it's the first on the list. I believe that in any undertaking, anything that happens in our lives that kind of jars us, I believe that it's that faith piece, that component that actually helps us get through. Because in this particular setting, we are talking about breast cancer. But in our community, I believe that we are kind of bearing the brunt of all the ills and every dis-ease, as well as all of the other issues that we are facing. With me being a native Houstonian, I remember when Harvey hit, and I was in a setting as this, and I said, what typically happens is that we're always in a storm. But Harvey just exposed that storm for us is continual, and it just expanded the need for help. But I believe to get through anything, it's our faith, because faith, again, by scripture, again, I don't want to preach, but faith by scripture is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Our ultimate desire is to be healed. So without that measure of faith, we don't have that push. We don't have the fuel to get us from diagnosis to healing. So I believe that faith is optimal. It has to be first. As soon as you get through talking to your doctor, you need to talk to your heavenly doctor.
That makes perfect sense. Dr. Tierney, in these stages of understanding and decision-making and figuring the next stage out, in your work as a level up coach, you're often, explaining to people what some of their approaches should be or could be to things that are unknown. Can you talk to us about that for a moment?
Absolutely. So I'm going to just pick right up where my brother, Pastor JT, left off. After you talk to your doctor, then you go to the throne and talk to your heavenly doctor, talk to Jesus, and then let's talk to your coach or your therapist. Because when we're navigating things like this, a lot of times what we often do, particularly in the Black community, we'll say, oh, well, child, I prayed about it and that was it. But those things that are keeping you up at night, the what if thoughts, the fear, your coach or your therapist can give you specific tools that'll help you address those things. Now, me as a life coach, a lot of my coaching practice and principles are rooted in the Word of God. So if it is something like fear that we're facing, then I send my clients right back to the Word and say, okay, well, what does the Word tell us about fear? Who does God say that we are, to help bolster those things that we're feeling as we're navigating this process. So I think having you a coach or a therapist that can help you walk through the mental and emotional anguish that sometimes comes along with this is paramount. So kind of in order, talk to your doctor, talk to your heavenly father, your chief physician, and then come and talk to your coach or your therapist.
Thank you for sharing those words. When we come back after the break, I want to have a one-on-one conversation with Ricky Fairley of the Black Breast Cancer Alliance. I think it's important as we're figuring out how to navigate those things that are unseen, that we talk to someone who has walked the walk. When we're back after the break.
It's about us. Everybody out together.
We are in sunny South Dallas. The
election is coming up. It's super important that folks know who they are voting for, but more importantly, what they are voting for. Y'all, we got the free shirts and free lunch right over here.
Freedom is our birthright. No matter what we're up against, we're sending a message in Dallas and Texas and in this country. We won't back down. That's what this bus tour is all about.
The housing cost is one of the most capitalized areas that we have found. People who are marginalized, that are brown and black, we are suffering the most. And I think that we have the biggest vote and the biggest impact in this election.
I'm voting for affordable housing, for sure.
We should not be paying the cost of a utility failure because our elected officials are too proud to say we need help.
I know that we can bring out our people to vote. It's a part of our birthright. It's a part of our heritage, and surely it's a part of our present and part of our future.
That's right. That's what's up. And we won't black down. Forward that message to 5 friends, because in that message, it's got links to how to get registered, how to check your registration status.
Like I said, 2:30 we'll start rendezvousing right here on this street. I am voting to let our voice be heard in the rural communities that, hey, we are people too. There are things that we need.
Free shirts, free food, and lots of power.
We are in Longview, Texas, where Black Voters Matter, 365.
Whatever type of oppression a white supremacist throws our way, we will not black down. We are in relentless pursuit of liberation of our people.
Freedom is liberation for black bodies and black communities to make economic change through political power.
Freedom is choice.
We won't black down.
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 Welcome back, everyone. As you can tell, each and every day we're navigating situations and circumstances that seem to catch us off guard. And breast cancer is one of those things that can literally knock us back on our heels, put us in our seat, and cause us to take a pause. Everybody, welcome in Rickie Fairley. Hi, Rickie.
How are you? It's so great to be here with you.
I am excited that you are here today. Tell our audience about yourself, who you are, and walk us through your journey. And then we'll talk a little bit more about your special work and your hashtag When We Trial.
Sure. So I'm a 11-year survivor of triple negative breast cancer. I was diagnosed with stage 3A, triple negative. I had a double mastectomy. I had 6 rounds of aggressive chemo, 6 weeks of radiation. I was given a clean bill of health. And then about a month later, I had a PET scan for an annual checkup. My doctor found 5 spots on my chest wall and said, okay, Rickie, you're now metastatic. You have 2 years to live. Get your affairs in order. We don't have anything more for you. Triple negative breast cancer, has the highest mortality rate. It's the worst one. It's the most aggressive breast cancer. And it's the only breast cancer that doesn't have a drug to prevent recurrence. And so, you may have taken something for 5 years. We don't have a drug. And so it comes back very rare like mine did. My doctor gave me 2 years to live. So I went on Dr. Google and I found the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation, who they were able to find me a doctor in Atlanta where I lived at the time, probably one of about 5 doctors that were working on triple negative research at the time. And this doctor, she put me on some experimental drugs. I did a lot more chemo and I didn't die. And so it's been 11 years. And so I know that God left me here to do this work. And when you talk about faith is what got me through. I had to relinquish my faith and give my life to God and say, okay, God, what have you got for me? And he gave me my purpose. And that's why I'm here.
Well, let me ask you this question, because you talk about your faith and we can see it in your face. When you marry those two, between faith and medicine, where do you often land? Because sometimes those of us who are on the outside looking in of someone else's journey don't really know how to step in and be a part of the village of that individual going through the experience. Can you explain or share that with us about your process and knowing when and how to allow other people into your space?
Well, faith without works is dead. That's a scripture, right? So you have to do the work. And that work encompasses putting a circle around you. And I think we talked earlier about the importance of mental health and just, feeling good about yourself and having that support system. And I actually have a circle of friends who just came to my aid. And for a year, someone was in my house every day. And on Sunday, somebody would come, somebody would leave, and they stayed with me through the process. But you need that circle around you, that matriarch around you to help you deal with it. You also need a care team, and that care team has to encompass a mental health provider, whether it's a coach or a counselor. That's all part of the healing that you need. And you really need it from the beginning. You need a support system to help you get through it. And my support team now, we're called SMAD, Sisters Making a Difference. And we have a prayer team, a prayer group every Sunday night. So they stayed with me, since I was sick. But you need that support system to help you through, in addition to having the best medical care you can get. And I think Dr. Hampton talked about it earlier, but, breast cancer is a different disease for Black women. And a couple of years ago, I started looking at the data and I started calling it Black breast cancer. It's a thing. And we now have a battery of data that's validating that a Black breast cancer cell looks different from a white breast cancer cell. And that the science is different and requires different drugs.
Thank you for sharing that. I do want to invite in Dr. Hampton, because you mentioned something that often I know our audience was viewing and they probably gasped and clutched their pearls when you said that you got your diagnosis, you had a double mastectomy, and then you went back for a PET scan, and then there was yet something else. Dr. Hampton, I'm not asking necessarily how often does that happen, but when it does, how do doctors navigate the understanding of that for their patients? Because typically it is, I went through everything. I thought I did everything. Why is there yet still more?
Yeah, that becomes a challenging, and it's very surprising even for us on the medical side. We think, we did everything right. We checked all the boxes, we followed all the algorithms, and then for a patient to still have disease left, and that's what we call the disease that we can't see, microscopic disease. It can be frustrating for us on our side as well. But I think that's where we as a team just kind of rallied together and help the patient get through it, help her family get through it. Luckily, there are some newer drugs out there that seem to have really, really good promise. And so I'm really encouraged now when I see triple negative. We've even changed the order of treatment. So when Ricky was diagnosed, she was given surgery first, then treated afterwards. What we realize is this is an aggressive tumor, so let's be aggressive up front. So now for triple negative, we tend to give the chemotherapy first, then do the surgery later. And it's always so heartwarming for me when I go in to do my surgery and there's not one tumor cell left. And so that's because of some of the newer medications and just our change in approach.
Absolutely. So Ricky, with Black Breast Cancer Alliance, there is a work that you do called When We Trial. Can you talk to us about When We Trial and how that fits into the landscape for people facing breast cancer?
We started this movement a few months ago because we need different drugs and treatments for Black women. And I think Dr. Hampton gave an example of how something was changed in a treatment by doing chemo first before surgery. But we need those changes. So, for example, Black women under 30 are getting breast cancer at 4 times the rate of white women. Black women under 35 are getting breast cancer at twice the rate, dying at 3 times the rate, well before they would have that first mammogram. So that protocol for breast cancer, doesn't work for Black women. We need a whole different way of thinking about breast cancer and different drugs, better drugs for our bodies. The drugs that we have now for standard of care were not tested on Black bodies. And so they're not working as hard for us as they should. And so we started our movement When We Trial, really to help dispel the myths about clinical trials and educate Black women about how the science works. And we did a bunch of research 2 years ago, and we found that really 2 things are happening. Doctors are not inviting Black women into clinical trials, so they're not getting invited. And then they don't really understand them. They don't know about them. There's this sort of fear of the unknown. They think about Henrietta Lacks and the syphilis study, but it's really because they don't understand that, no, you're not going to get a sugar pill and die. You're going to get standard of care. You're going to get a drug that already exists on the market, and maybe something new and better, or something better than that drug. That, that Advil you took last week was in a clinical trial. That heart medicine you gave your dog was in a clinical trial. And by breaking down the science into very simple terms, we're trying to educate Black women to understand that it's really the best option for a Black woman, especially a Black woman under 40. If you're diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer under 40, clinical trials is something you need to explore. But we had to explain it from the voice of a breastie, because we're the voice of trust. You know, the Breastie Club is not one that you want to be in, but once you're in it, it's sort of unconditional love and trust. And so we built this website basically showing women, talking about Black women, talking to Black women, about Black women, for Black women, and showing where they can go and see people that look like them, look like us. And instead of saying pronouns like you and them are going to die, we and us are together going to solve this. And, you know, Black women, we are powerful. We get a lot of stuff done. We have to do this for each other and for ourselves.
It is truly the championing of women going through crisis that really gives that sense of peace and ability to move forward. Dr. Hampton, one of the things, excuse me, that Ricky mentioned was the reason why women or any individual don't go through trials. We do think back to, you know, the Tuskegee Institute study. We go back to Henrietta Lacks, and there, you know, we have the G word. We don't want to be guinea pigs. And so how do we dispel some of those myths from a doctor's perspective related to trials?
Yeah, I like to explain to patients that the reason why we are as far as we are, we have to look back at our history. So now we have informed consent. You know, all of these things were changed because of some of the horrors of our past. So I love the fact we can use our past to really propel ourselves forward and propel the next generation. The other thing I also like to tell people is not every clinical trial means that you have to take a medication. For instance, I'm in a clinical trial where all I have to do is get my mammogram, which I'm supposed to get anyway. And what they're trying to figure out is, should there be different screening recommendations based on age, race? And so I don't have to take a pill. I'm just getting my mammogram. I upload my results. So I think there are many ways that we can be a part of clinical trials. And so just educating patients so that they understand it. I find me as a provider, when I tell them that I'm a part of a clinical trial, and they say, oh, well, if she's doing it, then it probably is okay for me as well.
I think that these types of informations that are, you know, being given to us today do help waylay some of the fears and the concerns. Ricky, you mentioned there was an age in which people should start to begin to take notice and advantage. And we don't get our mammograms as early as we should. What is the new age for getting a mammogram for early detection? Because I understand that stage 0 oftentimes is the best place to begin when women do get a diagnosis. Can both of you explain that to us?
Sure, I probably will yield to my doc, but a mammogram, the protocol for mammograms right now is age 40. But we have too many Black women that are dying before that age. We actually have a breastie today that went to hospice yesterday with triple negative breast cancer. She's 43. When she went for her first mammogram at 40, she already had disease. She had triple negative breast cancer, stage 3. So that's too late. So until we change that protocol, you know, we're all at risk. And so, and Dr. Hampton can probably explain this better, but you really need to know her story, and you should go to your doctor in your 20s, really. And if you have a history of breast cancer, you know, go 10 years before your mother had breast cancer. But you have to know her story. You need to be talking to your mamas and talking to your family members, talking on both sides of your family about your risk. So at least you know if you have a risk. But you know, most breast cancer isn't from a parent. It's not hereditary. So we really just have to be checking our breasts, and we don't think it's early enough. I mean, we just started recently a young women's campaign, and we have an HBCU internship where we're getting young women at age 19, 20, just to know their bodies, know your breasts, touch them, feel them, look at them, and get to know your bodies. And because so many young women are dismissed by doctors, they'll go and present with a risk, and the doctors say, oh, come back in 6 months, you're too young for a mammogram. But there's so many risks for Black women that we're not accommodating for with the sort of protocols for breast cancer. Black women cannot wait till 40. We need to be thinking about our breasts, knowing our her story, talking to our families, and having these conversations with both sides of our family, the men and the women, to really understand what we're up against.
Absolutely. Dr. Hampton?
Yeah, so a couple years ago, the American College of Radiology came out and said that Black and Jewish women are considered high risk. And because of that, they should get a risk assessment starting at age 30. where you're going to go into a breast specialist or a genetic counselor, where we can really talk about, is there family history? Do you have increased densities? Do you have some non-cancerous issues in your breast that have been going on? And then we can make a very personalized decision on if that particular woman should start screening earlier. And so I think with some studies that are out now trying to answer that question, like the Wisdom study, I think we can get there. But I recommend Black women starting at age 30, get that risk assessment and see if you qualify to start getting mammograms earlier.
Thank you both. When we come back after the break, I want to expand and explore this conversation as it relates to men and breast cancer. They are not immune. When we're back after the break.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys. This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And I hope that information that you're receiving today allows you to get into that space where you are able to not only discern, but to decide what treatment pathway or trial is best for you, but also how to be there for someone who is going through a cancer diagnosis. I am aware that there are men who also face having breast cancer. And oftentimes we do not talk about, do men have trials? Do men get mammograms? I'd like to ask Dr. Hampton this question and then talk to Pastor JT. But when do we get into that space of saying that our men, what do their body types need to look like? Because I understand that there's certain factors. Explain to us men and breast cancer, and where does this process start?
Yeah, so men get breast cancer. It accounts for about 1% of all breast cancers that we see here in the U.S. And so because men don't have, or at least most men don't have as much breast tissue as women, they usually will notice a lump or something that feels different many times before a woman will. And so if a man notices something, we recommend men do self-checks as well. Then we will send him to get a mammogram. They can get an ultrasound, the same exact workup as for women. And if they are diagnosed, then the treatments are exactly the same. Men can have a lumpectomy or a mastectomy. If they need to get chemotherapy, then we provide that as well. And they even can get the hormonal therapy for cancers that are hormonally active or estrogen or progesterone positive. So we treat male breast cancer exactly the same. So I recommend that men know their family history as well. It's very important, especially if there was male breast cancer in the family. And we got to look at both sides of the family, our mother's side and father's side, and be aware. And men, if something feels different to you, then be sure to get that checked out.
Now, you and Ricky both mentioned ancestry, and oftentimes in our community, we don't know who one of those parents are, or a grandparent or a great grandparent. So how do we bring in knowing, that's sort of like, to me, a disparity, and it's like a gut check. It's like, well, I don't know what my mom had because she wasn't around, or I don't know what my dad had or my grandmother had. Are there other ways to help individuals? And then also, does obesity, play a part in it, if not all of it is ancestry related or DNA based?
Yeah, so when we look at breast cancers that are hereditary, it's only 1 in 10 cases that are hereditary where we know that there's a family history. The other 9 are just going to be sort of pick out of the air. But I think it is important to try and have those health conversations in our family. I know we don't like to have them, but very important. And if we don't know the family history, we can still consider doing some genetic testing if there are histories of other cancers or if there are some other high-risk factors as well. And then you mentioned obesity. Yes, obesity is a risk factor, especially for women. When we gain large amounts of weight after menopause, which a lot of us do, those fat cells can hold on to more estrogen, which can put us at increased risk for breast cancer, particularly postmenopausal breast cancer. So very important to try and take care of our bodies because we've only got one life to live. And so we should try and take care of our bodies as best as we can.
Absolutely. Now, Pastor JT, I'm bringing you into this conversation because I know as a faith leader, you deal with people in a variety of seasons of their lives. And oftentimes, and specifically for men, helping them be in a space that it's okay to talk to others about what their spouse may be going through or what they are going through. How do you help them open up that level of conversation so that there is some transparency there so that they can get the help and the support they need?
I think the word that you just said is it. Transparency. I believe from a clergy position, oftentimes we have been seen as just because we are a preacher, maybe we did not, we weren't born in Houston, we were born in heaven. And, Jesus was the only one that came down and was all God and all man. We are all man. But I believe that transparency helps open the door. And when you have those transparent leaders, now the guard is able to come down. And you're able now to engage a man in a way that you probably wouldn't have if it wasn't for that. Now, I do believe that because there are a considerable amount of men that aren't regular church attenders, that is for one set of men. But I believe for that other set of men, I believe creating safe spaces and then being intentional on creating those safe spaces. Typically, as men, we are pretty much, guarded. We keep a lot to ourselves. Just being honest, most men, we aren't those that will go to the doctor because typically a man, we are looked at to be strong and we embrace pain and endure through things. And that's why I believe that so many men end up getting the diagnosis so late. And so we end up going in at stage 3 or stage 4. But I believe being intentional about those conversations, taking those conversations to the places where men are, going to your barbershops, going to your cigar lounges, and really informing our men and educating them and challenging them to take control of their lives, because just as Dr. Hampton mentioned, we only have one life, and it would be a shame to be a man that wants to be the man of the house, but ends up exiting the house before your time because you didn't take care of yourself.
Thank you for sharing that information, because we do live in this space where it does take all of us, especially as we're getting older and fewer of us, everybody's busy running around doing their own thing and not many want to give time and give space. I want to invite Dr. Tierney into this conversation as well, because, as we are moving through engagement and understanding of what people are facing, and I think it was already mentioned that it's one thing on top of a thing, on top of a thing, on top of another thing. How do we get from under the weight and make our care for ourselves priority?
The number one word here is boundaries. Often we don't have those boundaries set. So we're just running around taking care of everybody else's needs that we haven't even really first assessed our own needs and what we need. And so this is why oftentimes we'll see Big Mama who is exhausted and her feet are swelling, but I know I got to get this dinner cooked because they're counting on me at the church. You know, when Big Mama probably need to be sitting down or going to her doctor and saying, why are my feet swelling? So, you know, and so this is where we have to make sure that we're making ourselves a priority. You know, when we get on a plane, and really simple example, but it's true, it rings true. When you get on a plane and the flight attendants are walking us through the safety precautions, one of the things that they say is in the event of a loss of cabin pressure, the oxygen mask will fall from the cabin above you. Put your mask on first before assisting someone else. You know, and so when we start to see this mounting pressure of all these different things, you have to ask yourself, have I put my oxygen mask on first? I wouldn't be able to help you, you know, put your oxygen mask on if I'm suffocating myself, you know. And so oftentimes, particularly as women, we see doing things for ourselves as being selfish, when really it's selfish when we don't take care of ourselves, when we don't make ourselves a priority, you know. And so some of that mounting pressure is because we're applying our names to needs that don't have our name on it, when really your first priority is to take care of your needs. What is your house, you know, in need of, and take care of that first.
Absolutely. Thank you. We began this blog talking with Ricky Fairley, and I want to bring her back in because with Touch, which is a part of her organization, the Black Breast Cancer Alliance, there's a lot of work that she does in bringing advocates together, people together who can truly support the work that needs to go into caring for ourselves. Ricky, can you talk to us a little bit more about your collaboration?
Sure. So I wanted to say, when I got cancer, I had to learn that my peace is non-negotiable. And so you do have to protect yourself and put the mask on yourself first. But not only did I have to get the cancer out of my body, but I had to get all of the cancers out of my life. So I made a lot of crazy fast decisions while I was on chemo to change everything about my life and quit it and start a new one. I was the breadwinner for my family. I was the rainmaker for my ad agency that I worked for. And I kind of divorced myself from both of those things and moved to the beach because I had to protect myself. And that's one of the things I coach with other patients. You know, look around you and talk to, you know, engage with the people that bring you joy, because you can't let stress and anxiety play a role in your care. You have to take care of yourself first. And, you know, we are these powerful Black women. We wear the purple cape and the gold crown. We take care of everybody. But you have to stop the music and take care of yourself. And there's all that's going to go away if you're not here. And so it's really, really a priority. So we do coach breasties. We have a web series every week to talk to breasties about everything breast cancer. We have a support group on the first Saturday of every month called Touch Talk. And we do a lot of breastie gatherings to bring each other together. That breastie love is something I can't even describe, but it's really important to have that support and love around you and to know what your boundaries are. And if you don't know, you need to set some boundaries to know what you can and cannot do to really help your healing.
When we come back after the break, we want to talk a little bit more about that. How do you help your healing? Now, this is not just for breast cancer. This will be about all the things that we go through in life, in a sense that we have to discover our peace, we have to discover our purpose, we have to discover our passion, while at the same time figuring out how to release ourselves from those things that don't bring us any of the joy that we seek. When we're back after the break.
It's about us. Everybody out together. We are in sunny South Dallas. The election is coming up. It's super important that folks know who they are voting for, but more importantly, what they are voting for. Everybody, y'all, we got the free shirts and free lunch right over here.
Freedom is our birthright. No matter what we're up against, we're sending a message in Dallas and Texas and in the country. We won't back down. That's what this bus tour is all about.
The housing cost is one of the most capitalized areas that we have found. People who are marginalized, that are brown and Black, we are suffering the most. And I think that we have the biggest vote and the biggest impact in this election.
I'm voting for affordable housing, for sure.
we should not be paying the cost of a utility failure because our elected officials are too proud to say we need help.
I know that we can bring out our people to vote. It's a part of our birthright. It's a part of our heritage, and surely it's a part of our present and part of our future.
That's right. That's what's up. And we won't black down. Forward that message to 5 friends, because in that message, it's got links to how to get registered, how to check your registration status.
Like I said, 2:30 we'll start rendezvousing right here on this street. I am voting to let our voice be heard in the rural communities that, hey, we are people too. There are things that we need.
Free shirts, free food, and lots of power.
We are in Longview, Texas, where Black Voters Matter, 365.
Whatever type of oppression a white supremacist throws our way, we will not black down. We are in relentless pursuit of liberation of our people.
Freedom is liberation for Black bodies and Black communities to make economic change through political power.
Freedom is choice.
We won't black down.
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 Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, when we receive diagnosis or go through situations and circumstances that have a tendency to throw us off our center, it's difficult learning how to recover. I want to invite all of our guests back because I do want to talk about and have this conversation about recovery. You know, we have different ways that we recover and how we cope and how we move through the challenges that we are facing. Welcome back, everyone. I want to start with Dr. Hampton. You know, as we have talked about, people go through a variety of things in their seasons in life, but as they're faced with a medical diagnosis, how are you monitoring or helping individuals, and what are some of the things that they can do in order to be able to move their lives forward, even in the midst of facing a diagnosis?
Yeah, I mean, I do exactly what Ricky said and what Dr. Tierney said. I often try to find out where's the real cancer in life, because I can treat the cancer that's in the body. But, you know, I can't help you if you're in a bad relationship, if your children treat you bad, if your family's not treating you well, if your job is not treating you well. So I really try and take a whole patient approach and really have the patient look at what are the other factors in their life that are causing stress. You know, who might you need to cut out? Who might you need to not answer the phone that day? Because I think it's so important. And I think as women, we're so busy trying to help everyone else that we really have to help ourselves first. And, you know, no is a complete sentence. It's got a capital letter and a period. And you can say it lovingly with a smile, but we really should be firm in that to really protect ourselves so that we can heal, so that we can go through this journey and get out on the other side in a better place.
Absolutely. Pastor JT.
Wow. I'm loving the conversation today, and Dr. Hampton, that no, the capital letter and the period at the end. Thank you. I'm going to use it again, but I'm letting you know now. I appreciate that. But to be perfectly honest with you, there's a parable that Jesus talked about, and our own, I call him the world's bishop, Bishop Jakes, has a whole conference that's talked about "Woman, thou art loose." There was a woman who had a spirit of infirmity. She wasn't really sick, but mentally she had gravitated to illness, and she mentally created an illness to manifest itself, and it had a grip on her. Jesus didn't say, "Woman, you are healed." It's a "Woman, you are loose." And so many of us, we have people in our circle, we have situations that have come along, even situations in our past that have taken such a grip on us that it is manifesting itself in the forms of cancer, in the forms of depression, in the forms of addiction. But really, we have to figure out what is that thing, or what are those things that have come alongside of us and has now taken control of us and have us living a life where we are a character and we're not even living our true life of our true selves. So I believe that that is extremely important, because if it's not cancer, it will be another dis-ease. And I remember Dr. Tierney saying that before, the dis-eases of life. I just want to ensure that we aren't our own sickness, because no matter how many pills you take, if you don't deal with the person that you're staring at in the mirror, you'll never be healed.
Absolutely. Ricky Fairley.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Again, your piece is non-negotiable. It's really not. You have to just figure out how to get there, and it does take some effort and some thought, and to figure out who is bringing you joy. And you just have to say, okay, I love you, but you got to go right now. Maybe you can come back to my life in a few years, but right now I'm fighting like a girl to save my life, and it's going to take that energy to save yourself.
I thank you for sharing that, because literally I think that we could talk about this at another time and another time and another time. Is like, how do we always get to a space where something has to happen in our lives in order for us to really begin to see the landscape and the things that are going on that are bringing us discomfort and are causing us not to have peace? Dr. Tierney.
And you just literally set it up for exactly where I was going to go. I know today we're having the conversation around advocacy for breast cancer, but the things that we're talking about, the tools, the coaching tools, the how to advocate for yourself with your doctor, this is not something that we should just put in place once we receive a diagnosis. This is something that boundaries are needed now. So if you're watching this and you may be saying, well, I don't have breast cancer, so this doesn't really apply to me, or I don't know anybody that's suffering with any diseases or anything like that. So, everything that we said applies to you, sugar, because these are things that are just good principles and practices to have in your life. This is how you keep the diseases from manifesting in your body, whatever they may be. It may be something in your physical body, it may come out in your bank account, but these are things that really, when we stop and pause long enough to take our eyes off of all of the things out here and start focusing our attention in here to see what's going on with me, who am I, whose am I, and focusing in on what really matters, then we'll be able to really unplug from those things that are causing the diseases that are manifesting in our bodies. Okay, so that's really the number one thing that I want to make sure that everyone understands, that all of the things that we talked about today, it applies to you regardless of if you do or do not have a diagnosis. These are just good practices to put in place, and some practices that may help you from receiving a diagnosis down the road.
Absolutely. I'm going to come back through, because I want to ask each of you, if you had to give our audience something to consider releasing themselves from. Oftentimes people say, I didn't know where to start. I don't know where to begin. Everything you said was so amazing, but I don't know what to do with the information. Where do we begin? And I'll start with Dr. Hampton. If you had to say something that people could consider to begin to free themselves up from now, what would you say that would be?
I would say start out and find out, learn what makes you happy, and then find out what are the things that are preventing you from getting to that happiness. And sometimes they can be hard answers, and many times it can be really people close to us who mean well, but they don't often treat us well. And so I think, find out what makes you happy, and then find out what's preventing you from getting to that happiness.
Absolutely. Pastor JT.
I'd say free yourself from yesterday. I believe it's a lot of people that live in the past, and that creates the misery of today, which destroys the value of the future. So free yourself of yesterday. Try to forget the pain, but remember the lesson.
Absolutely. Ricky Fairley.
I would say, I wake up every morning and I thank God that I'm still alive. I shouldn't be here. And so think about what you're grateful for. What are you grateful for? And what are you not grateful for? And that kind of defines the people and the things you should be doing. You know, you should be living your best life every day. And think about what you're grateful for. What gifts do you have in your life that you're so grateful for? And then that can direct who you should be with.
Absolutely. Dr. Tierney.
I would say free yourself from the opinions and validations of others. A lot of times we're so focused on people pleasing and worried about what someone else is going to say, or did they like my photo on social media? And we're so busy looking at others that we're not looking at ourselves. You'll be surprised at the amazing transformations that my clients have been able to achieve just by doing simple internal things like practicing self-care, setting boundaries, finding their optimal balance, and all of the things that really causes them to focus on who they are and whose they are, and not what's happening out here or trying to live their life for the approval and opinion of other people. So I would absolutely say free yourself from the opinion and validations of other people.
Hold that thought for a moment, Dr. Tierney, because I've heard you say before, boundaries. Can you talk to us for just a moment about the difference between barriers and boundaries?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking me that. A lot of times when people hear the word boundaries, they automatically think barriers. Now, the difference between boundaries and barriers is, am I doing this thing because of them? So a barrier says I have to keep them out. I don't want them in my space. They're not going to come over here and do this. It's a barrier. Think about the wall on the highway. It's a barrier to keep that other car from coming over into your lane. But boundaries are about you. It's about what you need. It's about what is the thing that's going to help me feel my best, that's going to help me reach my goal. What is it that I need to do or not, do that's going to inhibit me from doing what it is that I need to do for me. Boundaries is your oxygen mask, okay? Barriers is running to put the oxygen mask on someone else, okay? So that's the major difference. It's all about what it is that you need. Also, boundaries are not divisive. Barriers are. So when you set up barriers, what you're doing is telling that other person what they're not going to do. But when you set up a boundary, what you're saying to yourself is, hey, sugar, this is what you need. So you're not going to go to that party today. You're going to send a gift and, stay home. Okay. So those are the major differences between boundaries and barriers. And having boundaries is critical. You have to have some boundaries. You cannot live this life and thrive without boundaries.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that wisdom key. We're back after the break. I'll give my reflection.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement. There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Your money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, we all experience many trials and tribulations in this life. But when we have proper thinking within us, when we have people around us who can identify and understand where we're trying to go and what we're going through, and when we are able to just take a pause and breathe and inhale and exhale, it gives us the ability to find the clarity that we need to make the moves that we need to make. Whether you need to talk to a coach, your pastor, get engaged in an organization, talk to your doctor, you know that there's an avenue that you can go down that will yield some favorable result. the one that you need for you. I think it's important as we have these conversations around how do we get balance in the midst of crisis and in the midst of storms. It's important that we know where we are. And sometimes we can lose ourselves in all of the things that we're facing because it literally is one thing piled on top of another, or another. So I hope that if you learned something today, it's discovering how to prioritize you, your health, and your well-being. Thank you all for watching. Bye now.